My name's Linda Freeman Castleman, and I was born September 1st, 1946.
What's the names of your siblings or sibling and your parents?
Okay. I have a sister, Beverly, that's 2.5 years older than I am. And my parents were Corwin Freeman and Eunice Darlene Freeman.
When did your parents grow up? Like what different time periods?
In the 20s and 20s they were born, and my mother used to talk about the dirty 30s and the depression, and she recalled one time when she was coming home from school, they let school out early because the dust storms were so bad. And so they walked home, and they barely got home because they couldn't tell where they were at. And when they got into their farmyard, the chickens had squatted down on the ground and because it was so dark, they just thought it was nighttime, and so they didn't even go in to roost. They just stayed outside.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up south of Simpson, Kansas, about 11 miles south of Simpson, on a farm.
What was happening in the world when you were growing up and when you were a teenager?
Well, the thing that probably stands out the most is when I was a junior in high school. We were getting ready, it was in November, and we were getting ready for our junior class play. Or no, it was my senior class play. And anyway, I had been sick that day and I can still remember laying on the couch, and I was watching TV, and all of a sudden they broke into whatever I was watching, and Walter Cronkite, who was with CBS, came on the air and said that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated, and I can remember how he could hardly get the words out. He was so choked up and so emotional, and so that probably stood out the most because nothing like that had ever happened before, or even close to that growing up.
What are the different things that your family would do for fun?
Well, the thing I enjoyed the most, I would have to say, is when I was 9 years old, we would go every other year to California. I had relatives that lived out there, and they had boats, and they taught us how to water ski. And so we had so much fun with that the following summer, my dad bought a ski boat, and we would come over to Canopolis on Sundays in the summertime and water ski. And we had friends that we would bring along, and there were just many happy times together with the other couples that would go with us. So that was probably the thing I enjoyed the most.
What would you do with your friends?
Well, my probably closest friend was, her name was Pat Finney, and she had a sister, Janet, who was the same age as my sister, Beverly. And the four of us, a lot of time, we'd get together. I can remember one of the most memorable times, we stayed at Pat and Janet's, and their parents would go bowling, and so they would just kind of turn the house over to us. And I can remember that we decided to fix a great big meal, and so I think we fixed hamburgers, but we had French fries and onion rings, and we made everything from scratch, and it was just fun being together. And then a lot of times we would go to Beloit and go to the show, or there was a drive-in, and we would have fun going there. And so just enjoy, and we were cheerleaders together. The four of us got to be cheerleaders, and that was fun. So.
What different schools did you attend?
Well, I went to grade school and high school at Simpson. We just had the one building, and both grade school and high school were in that building, and it was a small school. Matter of fact, in my senior year in high school, there were 32 in high school, and there were 7 in my graduating class. So about 2 years later, they consolidated in Mitchell County and closed our school, which was really sad. But I understand why they did it, but it was still sad.
What were your favorite subjects?
Probably I would say I loved typing, and I also really liked world history. Both of those were taught by the coaches at our school, and I liked the way that Bill Ross, my history teacher, taught the class. He laid out what we would cover. He told us how to study for tests, and if you did what he told you, you usually got a really good grade. And that's probably one of my best grades I got in school.
How did you meet Grandpa?
When I went off to college, which is Fort Hays, my freshman year, I was dating a young man that was going to school at Kansas State. And he was friends with Steve, and he asked Steve if he would kind of show me around Hays and even bring me home on weekends so we could be together. And so that's what we did. And we just, it got to the point that I didn't want to come home. I wanted to stay there and do things with Steve instead of Ron. So that's how we met.
How did Grandpa propose to you?
Well, we'd gotten engaged in February, and we were going to get married in August. And then in about July, I think it was, Steve got kind of unsure of himself, and so we called the wedding off. And then about a month or two later, he decided that he did love me and wanted to get married. And so I had not received a diamond when the first time we got engaged. So when he came and told me that he wanted to get married, I said, well, I wanted to have a diamond. And so he went out and bought me one. And so I had a diamond ring when I got married.
When and where did you get married?
We got married in Simpson at the Methodist Church there, and it was November 5th, 1966.
What are the names and birth dates of your kids?
My oldest son is Wade Wesley Castleman, and he was born December 10th, 1968. And his middle name, Wesley, was named after Steve's father, who was killed in World War II before Steve was even born. So that's where we got that name. And when I was expecting my second child, we decided that if it was a boy, I don't have any brothers, and there was no one to carry out my maiden name, and so, which was Freeman, and so we wanted our son, if we had a son, to have that as his middle name, and so we named him K. Freeman Castleman. And he was born February 15th, 1972.
What are special memories you have with your kids?
Well, one of the Christmases that I remember, I was working out at South High as a para, and one of the other paras' husband would, at Christmas time, go around dressed as Santa Claus and go to people's homes and surprise their children. And so I decided to have Santa come to our house, and I didn't tell Steve or anybody that Santa was coming. When we were getting ready to open our gifts after dinner that night, the doorbell rang, and I sent the boys to the door to see who was there, and Santa Claus was, and they were shocked, and Steve was shocked even more. So that was a fun time. But when the boys were in high school, probably the most fun I had was watching them run cross country and track, and the successes they had. So,
Where all have you lived?
well, we've lived in Manhattan when we were first married, and then when Steve got his teaching job here in Salina at Central, we moved to Salina, and we lived on 1327 Pawnee, and from there we moved to 502 South 8th Street. It was a big 2-story house, and then we moved to the house we live in here on Holmes Road, and we've lived here ever since.
Where all have you worked?
My first real job, I would say, was at Farm Bureau in the life insurance department in Manhattan when we were first married. And then here in Salina, I worked at School Specialty in the, it was overseas sales, and it was really fun because we had a lot of foreign countries such as Saudi Arabia who had lots of oil money, and so they would place these huge orders for school supplies, and that was our job to get things organized to send. So I worked there, and then I worked as a para at South High, and that's when I made the decision to go back to school and finish my degree. And so I would work there days, and then at night, 3 nights a week, I would go to Marymount and take and get classes in education. And then finally I got my teaching job at Meadowlark Ridge Elementary, and I taught there for 27 years.
What did you do to get through the hard times?
Probably the thing that saved us the most was we taught school during the school year, but in the summers we would paint houses for people, and sometimes we'd paint 4 or 5 houses a summer, and we taught the boys how to paint, and so they would help us with scraping and then finally painting. And I think it was good for them because they knew that if at some point in their life they needed a job, they could always paint houses. And so we did that for several years, and that really helped us a lot.
What are your favorite holidays and traditions that you have?
Well, I enjoy Easter. We get together on usually Saturday before Easter, and it's fun to have the family together for that. And then we always get together on Christmas Eve. That's when we celebrate Christmas, and just having the family together around the table, it's just a special time.
What are your favorite things to do now that you're retired?
I love to quilt, and I also love to garden. We've done a lot to our backyard garden, so we spend a lot of time outside, so I enjoy that. And then we have a boat, and we like to go fishing, and I've just recently, my last birthday, Steve got me a kayak, and he also has one, and so I hope to do more of that this summer.
What are your hopes for your grandchildren and children?
I hope that they will grow or continue to live in a free world, and that there will be peace. And I have to say I'm very concerned about what's going to happen out there, and I just pray that they'll be safe.
Right. Thank you for your time and your interview today.
Well, I'm glad that I could do it for you,